Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Phil, welcome to my computer lab. Today we're building a Windows 98 gaming PC, but this one is different. It's based around the Itx form factor. The Itx form factor is all about being small, compact, minimalistic, but also power efficient and quiet. There are not too many options for Windows 98 gaming in the Itx form factor, so a lot of these components have been picked very carefully. So in this video I'll talk a little bit about the parts. I'll put everything on the test bench, install Windows 98. We definitely run some benchmarks to see what this machine can do, and at the end I wrap it all up with a summary and talk about any findings or issues that I encountered. The system is based around an Itx motherboard from MSI. It is the MS7199. Has passive cooling, although that cooler does get quite hot. Now there's a fan header here, so if you want to mount a little fan on there, absolutely, that's a good idea. We've got an ID port, two SATA interface ports, but I will talk about that one in a little bit more detail. We've got some front headers here for USB and as well as for the audio. With the audio, these jumpers were not set by default, so I did not get any audio at the back, which was very confusing, and it was only after finding a manual it mentioned that you have to place these jumpers in order to route the audio signal towards the back. The memory is DDR2 and it uses a standard ATX power connector. Underneath this cooler we find the main processor and also the North Bridge. The processor is from Via and it's a C7 Eden series running at 1 GHz. The onboard graphics card is a Via Unichrome Pro and it shares its memory from the DDR2 memory module. Let's have a look at all the interface ports at the back. We have two PS2 ports and luckily I was able to get the I/O shield, which is always an issue sometimes with these boards. We've got VGA and DVI, so this motherboard has an integrated GPU and we will find out later how powerful that is. The machine also outputs S-Video, and in the BIOS you can configure the standard like a PAL for example or NTC. We've got an Ethernet port, two USB ports, two serial ports, and these are the audio ports. A single PCI slot, and you can already see I've upgraded the video card to a NVIDIA GeForce FX 5500, and we're gonna benchmark the integrated graphics first, and then I'm gonna upgrade the machine with the GeForce FX, and we will see what kind of performance boost we're gonna get. The motherboard has a single DDR2 slot, so we're using a 512 megabyte DDR2 memory stick. Initially I went with a SATA hard drive, but later you'll see that I ran into some issues, so in the end I used a standard 80 gigabyte IDE hard drive and also a optical drive. The hard drive configured to master, the optical drive configured to slave. Here we've got the system that we're going to use to go forward in this video. I put the Itx motherboard on my test bench just to make working with it a little bit easier. A USB dongle for the wireless keyboard and mouse set, and we're using a 24-inch widescreen monitor with a 1920 by 1200 resolution. Firstly, I want to make sure and test whether these graphics cards support that resolution, and secondly, we can run games at 1600 by 1200 resolution for a bit of benchmarking to have some demanding and stressful settings. Okay, let's have a look at the BIOS options. There's not much we have to change. As always, I start by loading the optimized BIOS defaults. The time and date is already been set, and here we can see the optical drive getting picked up for the IDE channel and the solid state drive on the SATA port. Under advanced options, I'm just going to make sure that the boot order is correct, that we're booting off the CD-ROM first in order for me to install Windows 98. And apart from that, there's really nothing else we have to change. No, there's one setting under the IDE devices. I'm going to change the SATA mode to IDE. But that's really it. Some of the other options I just wanted to show you. There's a cell menu where you can do some basic overclocking. You can lower the multiplier, and you can also adjust the front side bus to do some basic overclocking. And there's a hardware monitor to keep check on the CPU temperatures. We're having at the moment 51 degrees, but it's very hot outside. We've got 40 degrees and the air conditioner is off, so don't be alarmed too much. But if you're worried, you can just put a little fan on top of the big passive cooler. It's got a fan header right next to it. Okay, we're gonna boot from the CD-ROM and install Windows 98. We're almost done with the Windows 98 installation. Twice I had to shut down the computer because the installation would freeze. Not too much of a concern because Windows 98 sometimes struggles picking up certain devices. So we'll see very shortly how the installation actually went. Okay, here we are, the first boot into Windows 98. The installation was a success. Let's have a look in the device manager and see what's going on here. Okay, so there's an issue with the controllers. We'll have a look at that later. And the network driver is not loaded, the sound driver and also the USB driver. So I'm gonna install all the drivers. If you're interested in what drivers I'm using, I'll put a link down below. I'm hosting them all on my website for other people to also use, because some of these drivers were a little bit hard to find. So I'm not having much luck with the device manager, especially the SATA controller. Now, I've had issues with VIA SATA controllers in the past, so what I'm going to do is just go back to a standard IDE hard drive and see if the installation turns out to be better. With the IDE hard drive, the installation went a lot smoother. I didn't have any hangs or crashes during the installation, and also all the devices installed correctly, including the USB driver as well as the graphics driver. We've got the drivers for the sound card, also the Ethernet controller and the VIA 4-in-1 chipset driver. So what I'm going to do next is just install some benchmarks and some games, and we have a look at the performance with the onboard shared graphics card. I ran into another issue. Whenever I start a benchmark, anything to do with 3D graphics, the monitor will just blank out and the signal is gone. And I believe it might have something to do with the DVI connection. So I'll try a VGA cable instead and see if that works better. Using the VGA cable fixed that problem. However, look at that score, 27 3D marks. I think there's more going on here, because here it says we're getting 0 or 1 frames per second, and look at that, that's a lot smoother. So there's something odd going on with the driver and DirectX, or at least with this benchmark. In 3D Mark 2000, everything seems to run fine. We're getting a score of 2098. Okay, so I've just installed the GeForce FX 5500, and what we need to do is go into the BIOS under the AGP settings, and through the memory size we can basically disable the onboard graphics card, because otherwise it's still gonna take some of the RAM and use it for the onboard video card. And here we can see that the FX 5500 can run the 1920 by 1200 widescreen resolution. We're using driver version 5664, and just going back to the onboard video card, the highest resolution that was available was 1600 by 1200, so it did not pick up the widescreen resolutions. Okay, let's go over the benchmark results. Now, just a quick note on 3D Mark 99. The GeForce FX had exactly the same problem, so there might be a compatibility issue with the VIA processor and not so much with the graphics card. Okay, in 3D Mark 2000, we're getting 2098 for the onboard graphics, and the GeForce gets almost 5000, so quite a nice boost. Moving on to GL Quake, we've got two resolutions at 1024 by 768. The performance goes from around 48 to 88, so not quite, basically double the performance. And looking at the 1600 by 1200 resolution, we're going from 23 to 38. So here, even the GeForce FX runs a little bit out of steam. In Quake 2, we can see a similar trend. At 1024 by 768, we're going from 32 to 79. And at 1600 by 1200, we're going from a 17.1 to around 38. Dracan, a DirectX benchmark at 1024 by 768. 26.1 frames, and that goes up to 37 on the GeForce. And if you play at 1600 by 1200, we're going from 19 FPS for the onboard graphics to 30.1 with the GeForce. And then we've got incoming. That game only goes up to 1024 by 768. We're getting 30.8 FPS with the onboard graphics and 67.4 with the GeForce. What an interesting build. However, a lot of things went wrong. This was certainly not a smooth build. I had issues using the SATA hard drive, so I was forced to switch back to an IDE based hard drive. So that's good old VIA for you. They always have issues with the SATA controller, it seems. Another issue I ran into was the machine wouldn't shut down. It would hang at the shutdown screen. The way to fix this was installing the unofficial service pack for Windows 98. That resolved the issue. You saw it in the video. When using the DVI output of the onboard video card, it lost the signal as soon as I started any 3D stuff like games or benchmarks. So the workaround was using a VGA cable. Having only a single PCI slot is actually quite a challenge. You either go with a faster video card or a better sound card. Now, the onboard VIA sound card is certainly not high-end, but it's certainly better compared to the onboard graphics card. So by going with the FX 5500, we basically doubled the gaming performance, and in my opinion, having better frames per second is definitely more important than having slightly better sound. I had another issue with the IDE storage controller. After installing the VIA 4-in-1 driver, I noticed that the machine was running in compatibility mode and I had no optical drive. So the solution around that was booting into safe mode and then going to the device manager and manually changing out the storage driver to the standard IDE driver for Microsoft, and then everything was smooth sailing and I was able to enable the DMA mode as well on the hard drive and everything was working fine. In terms of performance, if you're playing games at 1024 by 768 and 32-bit colors, you will have a very good gaming experience. 1600 by 1200 proved to be a little bit too demanding, and I'm pretty sure that is because we're using a PCI graphics card, and I believe that's just holding back the system. In terms of finding the parts, the case is fairly straightforward. There are so many ITX cases out there, you should not have a hard time finding a new ITX case at a good price. The graphics card is a little bit harder to find and you might have to pay a bit of a premium. I had a look on eBay, you're looking at around 40 Australian dollars shipped for the FX 5500, and that's plenty of stock. A couple of eBay sellers sell large quantities of that card. Finding the Itx motherboard is likely going to be the biggest challenge. I had a quick look on eBay and in the US I found a similar board for $25 US, so that's actually quite promising. However, all the other boards, the prices quickly increased, so you might have to be a little bit patient, maybe put the model number into a search and set yourself a few reminders, because these are definitely not that common. And that's it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. As always, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so. Hit the like or dislike button, share the video, and leave me a comment down below. I see you next week in another video.